And I want to thank the entire Encompass team.
Mic check. This is a mic test. Mic test. 1, 2, 1, 2. Mic check. Mic check.
Well, good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the INCOMPAS Policy Summit. And as you think about this year, I want you to think about 250, 45, and 30. So this year we celebrate the nation's 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence. INCOMPAS started in 1981, 45 years ago, to be the first founding advocate for competition in telecommunications. And then 30 years ago, a bipartisan majority, President Clinton, with a Republican Congress, passed the 1996 Telecommunications Act that we celebrate this year as the Constitution and the framework of competition, both in telecommunications, communications, and our internet. And so really landmark celebrations that we look back, we gain lessons and insight, but the purpose of this policy summit is to look forward. And so I'm very pleased and proud to be able to welcome everyone. This year we have, the next 2 days, an amazing group of policymakers, policy leaders, decision makers, industry leaders. I'm very proud that our association in each decade, with each change of technology, as the market evolves, we evolve, we adapt, and we prepare not for the past, but for the future. And over the last 2 or 3 years, INCOMPAS has changed dramatically once again, in that we've diversified, expanded our membership. We created something called the AI Competition Center and Competition Innovation Center. And now it's hard to imagine or comprehend, but we have small modular nuclear reactors as member companies. We have the largest natural gas pipeline and generation company. We have Southwestern Power that's building grid and transmission, Pacific Fusion. So the new energy and innovations, the grid and transmission and the pipelines that meet at the data center. Then all of our member companies that are building the broadband networks and connecting to the home, to the data center, to the business, and globally through the subsea cables. We have the full connectivity in the broadband infrastructure. Again, both sides of the data center, the full stack of AI infrastructure, and to be able to advocate for the full supply that we need as a nation to lead in AI and the new economy that is coming through this transformational technology. And today we'll soon be talking to Chairman Hudson about how do we build as fast as we can, streamline the permitting process, and complete the mission that America adopted coming out of COVID to connect every American to broadband at high speed, high capacity in the unserved and underserved markets of our country. So we have a lot ahead of us. I'm very, very proud that INCOMPAS is able to bring so many policymakers. And the question you have to ask, why is that? And I think it's a couple reasons. One, we've been able to, over the 4.5 decades that we've advocated, create a level of trust among policymakers that it is an enduring mission and principle of promoting competition, abundance, prosperity, opportunity by the policies we advocate for. That it is in the public interest, it is in the common good to have competition across all networks, all technologies, all platforms. And because it is that common American principle of free market competition, that we can bring both sides of the aisle together, both House and Senate, the administration, around those enduring principles. One, we have a tremendous board, and another thing, we have a tremendous set of companies, we have a tremendous board, and we have a gifted, talented staff. And those relationships in industry, in the board, and on the Hill, and with the administration, those relationships and that trust also is why we're able to have the type of participation that we will see over the next 2 days. As we do this work, there are individuals who make outstanding contributions and are people that have rich, deep legacy. One is Scott Whittam, who this past year fought a long, hard battle with cancer, and he, just recently passed away. And so what I'd like to do is just remember him. He's a great father, great husband, great pioneer in our industry. So if you don't mind, just a moment of silence for Scott Woodham. Thank you very much. And the next thing that I want to do before I call Chairman Hudson up is to remind everyone that tonight we'll have a reception celebrating the 1996 Telecom Act. Senator Markey will be here as one of the key members who shaped the legislation. We'll have a great gathering just to look back as the rest of our time is looking forward. Chairman Hudson, with that, I'm going to call you up and start the day. North Carolina, former staffer for how many members? From Texas, North Carolina, any other?
Yeah, Texas and North Carolina, 2 states.
Yeah, is that, are y'all able to hear us?
Yeah, I'm from North Carolina, but I consider myself half Texan because I work for Judge Carter and Mike Conaway.
Yeah.
I was in Judge Carter's office as his chief, and there was a county commissioner from Houston sitting in the lobby waiting. And I thought, well, I better go talk to him. This is an important visitor. And start talking to him. He said, where in Texas are you from? I said, North Carolina. He goes, North Carolina. I can't believe Judge Carter as a chief is not from Texas. And he just goes on and on, ranting and raving. And I used one of the lines I use normally. I said, well, a lot of great Texans weren't born in Texas. He said, that's true. I'm from California. Good grief. Giving me a hard time. I've had a lot of good opportunities, and I actually got to serve with 3 members of Congress that I worked for. So that was a unique opportunity to have a different relationship, but good experience, and definitely prepared me. I had a leg up on my freshman class because I sort of knew how this place worked.
There's a saying that the best members are former staffers. Now, I was a former staffer, so we're a little bit biased. But I do believe it's true because it allows you to know the process, the principles, the policy, the people. You can hit the ground running. You're now in tremendous leadership positions of chairing the NRCC, the Congressional Committee on all the elections across the country. You travel the country, you know the country, as well as your district in North Carolina and the members you work for as a staff. Talk a little bit as you lead the Committee on Communications and Technology on the Energy and Commerce Committee, your priorities, what's important, and then we'll talk about, what are the things that we can do as an association, our member companies, the staff, and those that we work with. How can we help you achieve your mission?
Well, I appreciate that, and it's great to be with all of you today, and appreciate this opportunity. One of my top priorities is getting broadband deployed to unserved and underserved areas. It's the new haves and have-nots in America are those who have broadband access and those who have not. And those of us who didn't understand that woke up when COVID hit. All of a sudden, you were studying from home, you were working from home, you were getting healthcare at home. And we realize those folks who don't have access to broadband, they just don't have access to the American dream, to education, to healthcare, so many things. And so it's important that we get broadband nationwide. And also, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, I mean, the new economy is going to depend on technology, and it's changing so rapidly. And it's exciting to think about, what is AI and quantum computing and 6G, what opportunities do they bring? I mean, we're almost, 10 years from now, we're not going to recognize the way the economy was now compared to then. And so if everyone can't participate in that, then I think that sets us behind. And our number one priority as a nation strategically has got to be that we lead in the new technology, that we lead and set the standards for AI, that we lead in quantum computing, that we don't let China beat us. And their goal is to set the standards for the world so that the world will buy their products only, and they can dominate this space. And there's an existential threat there because our military depends on this technology. And if China gets the leg up on us in AI, they can do things like take Taiwan, and we can't do anything about it. And so it makes the world a much more dangerous place if we lose this race. And so we have to win. And so that should be the number one priority of every aspect of government, but it's certainly a priority for me with the telecom subcommittee. And for us as policymakers, it's how do we make sure we've got guardrails in place to protect the American people, but not overregulate to the point that we stifle the innovation that we lead the world in, that's going to enable us to win this race. I believe we're going to win the race. I think we are going to set the standards for the world, and so we just need to make sure that we're doing the things we need to do to again allow the growth and development and innovation that's going to happen, and figure out what that right regulatory scheme looks like so that we don't stifle it.
Earlier in the beginning of the Congress, at the first of last year, you introduced the SPEED Act. We were very pleased that INCOMPAS could endorse that, support it. How do you take the BEAD money, deploy it in a technology neutral way as quickly as possible? How do you think NTIA is doing? What do you think is the status of the BEAD program? Anything that can be done to get shovels in the ground and connectivity to homes across the country?
Well, appreciate you mentioning that. And it was important that y'all endorsed the legislation and helped us educate other members of Congress. I think that's an important role y'all play is a lot of my colleagues don't understand as much about this as they need to. And so y'all play an important role in that. The Speed for BEAD legislation I wrote, I kind of had an audience of one. I didn't really expect it to be law. I wanted Donald Trump to see it, and Chairman Carr and everybody in between, as sort of our intent, because the BEAD program came out of the Infrastructure Act, $42.5 billion to deploy broadband. And after 3 years, the Biden administration had issued $0, not 1 inch of fiber had been laid. And so that was the problem. And I'll be honest, I got a lot of pressure from Republicans to cancel the whole thing, just carve that money back. But I believe it's so important that we close this digital divide that I said, no, we're not going to cancel the program, but we're going to fix it so that it's effective. And, one of the major problems I had with it was all this extra stuff that they'd added on had nothing to do with broadband, whether it was, the scheme they developed to illegally set rates by forcing states to do it. The law says we can't do it. So they went around the law by forcing states to set rates. I think that was unconstitutional, but, and then setting requirements, labor requirements, environmental requirements, again, that had nothing to do with broadband. And then picking winners and losers on technology. I thought that was a mistake. I think you were exactly right. The best thing for this industry is competition. And, that's where you're driving the innovation. And so I thought those were all mistakes with the BEAD program. Put it in the legislative form to send a signal to the administration. This is where we are. And fortunately, the administration implemented most of SPEED. And now I think NTIA is doing a fantastic job. We've got 43 states. Money has been approved. North Carolina is going to get about 1.5 billion out of that. And we're moving quickly. So I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing from NTIA. I'm anxious. Let's get some shovels going. Let's get this broadband deployed.
And before we came out, we talked a little bit about the non-deployment money and the funding after all the awards have been made to connect the last mile and unserved, underserved areas. The non-deployment money, things like E911, public safety, how do you use some of those resources to speed permitting or give localities the resources and capacity that they need to permit faster. Talk about the use of those funds as well as permitting efforts and permitting reform within the committee, both on the broadband side and on the energy side, and the chances of this Congress acting to speed and streamline permitting.
Yeah, so those non-deployment funds make up almost half of the BEAD money. I mean, it's 15 to 20 billion with some estimates. And as a fiscal conservative, it bothers me that half the money is basically set aside to spend however the policymakers and the governors decide they want to spend it. You know, some governors will do a better job than others, but you know, there's definitely a pot of money out there with those non-deployment funds that I think Congress ought to have a little more say in how it's spent. And you know, I've got some ideas. I'm trying to build consensus now with the Democrats on the committee to use some of those funds to pay for next generation 911, which has been a top priority for me. You know, the ability for 911 centers to receive text messages, to geolocate callers. You know, everybody's heard stories of, you know, someone having trouble in a hotel and you can't get the police to them in time because you don't know what floor they're on. Modern technology can tell you, but only a few or some 911 centers can do that. You know, if you're hiding under the bed and there's a bad guy in the house, send a text because you can't call because you don't want them to hear you talking. So send a text to 911, and they can forward the text to the police officers on the way. So it makes it safer for the police officers, safer for people. So there's a lot of technology advances that wealthy counties have now, and not so wealthy counties maybe don't have access to. And so I want to close that divide so that we have next generation 911 across the country. And but that takes money. And in the past, folks have tried to use spectrum auction money. We weren't able to do that through reconciliation. So I think these non-deployment funds is a good place to look. The challenge is we don't have a really good up-to-date estimate of what it's really going to cost to finish the next generation 911. Because a lot of places, like across my district in North Carolina, I think almost all of my counties have next gen 911 centers. They've already upgraded. So I think there's a lot less of these counties out there than when we did the survey before. But on the other hand, it might cost more to upgrade now with inflation and so forth. So I don't know what the right number is. So that's a challenge in trying to figure out how to pay for it if you don't know what it's going to cost. So I think doing something with those non-deployment funds where either let states decide or we just go ahead and tell NTIA set up a program and use those funds is one good use. I know others have good ideas on how to spend it. That's one thing Congress is good at, spending money. And then there was a second part of your question.
The second part is permitting reform.
Yeah. So you could throw all the money in the world at this problem, but it's not going to solve it because the bottleneck on broadband is permitting reform. And we've got great legislation moving through the House that can address this. We've got some of it's bipartisan, most of it's bipartisan. A little bit of it, we're getting some pushback. But basically, our idea is, you know, put shot clocks on state and local approvals. So, you know, the Democrats during our markups argued, oh, you're crushing local control. You're not allowing them to have input, which is not the case. I mean, locals can still turn down projects. We just put a timeline on how much time they have to review those projects. And the other issue we see are some of these municipalities will charge excessive fees. They see this as a great way to create revenue for their municipality rather than actually reflecting the true cost of the permitting process. So looking at capping fees, you know, there's a number of good reforms that we're continuing to try to push, and you know, getting bipartisan buy-in is really important in the House because we've got to get those 8 Democrat senators in the Senate to go along. So any help y'all can give us educating folks on how important permitting reform is, I think it's important. Because again, it's, you know, we can push all the money out the door, but if it takes years to get a permit approved, you're not going to get broadband in the ground.
And that one aspect of the broadband package that's before your committee is something called the Rail Act that would allow our member companies who are building fiber networks to cross the railroad with a time certain at actual cost. Is one of those rare regulatory gaps in that the Federal Rail Administration does not have jurisdiction. The FCC has no jurisdiction. And so the railroad actually is the dividing line so many times in our communities where the digital divide actually starts. And until we can cross the rail, whether it is on long routes or into neighborhoods, this is a huge issue for our industry, the broadband industry. And I want to thank you for your support of the Rail Act, having it in the package, having bipartisan support for it. Any predictions of whether we're going to get a permitting reform package through the House and Senate this year?
I believe we will. I'm cautiously optimistic. It's one of the reasons I wanted to be on Energy and Commerce Committee is as a staffer, I had watched, this is a committee that gets things done. It's a committee where you have vigorous arguments and then you compromise and you get real legislation done. When I first got on the committee under Chairman Upton, I think we had 90 bills signed into law that Congress. I mean, just incredible record of achievement. Unfortunately, in the last few years, it's gotten harder and harder to work together. And this is one issue where it's been frustrating for me because the Democrats argued against our permitting reform overall by saying you're crushing local control. You're taking away control from locals. Then when it comes to the broadband permitting, they say we can't support this unless you support this one particular initiative, which basically says we're going to run transition lines from the middle of America where we've got a bunch of wind and solar to California. And the plan says that the locals and the states have no input on where those transmission lines go. They will not be reimbursed and they cannot access the energy. So it's like, I've wanted to say, can you just debate each other and I'll just be quiet over here? Like, which one is it? Talk about crushing local control. And that's just a non-starter for us. And so that's the hang up right now but I believe, Democrats understand how important permitting reform is. I mean, their windmills and their solar farms need permitting reform too, to get to the grid. And so I believe we'll get there. We're playing some frustrating games right now, but I've tried to just sort of stay calm and just keep an open door, and try to keep these communications going. There are a number of my Democrat colleagues who will tell me in private that they want to vote for it and they understand it. But so that's why I'm optimistic that we can get there. But right now it's kind of hung up in partisanship.
Well, we want to help get the permitting and reform packages on both sides of the data center, on the energy, environmental, and on the broadband package through the House and to the Senate this year. Anything that we can do to help, we stand ready to do so.
Well, and I keep saying these data centers, it's great to build them, but if you don't have broadband running to them, they're big refrigerators. They're not data centers, right? You got to get the data in and out. So it's important we get it right.
And we want to work with you on the non-deployment on the advanced E911. Many of our companies are going through the transition now from TDM to IP, and maintaining and preserving public safety in that transition is critical, both with what the FCC is doing, and so any support that you can give to the transition, preserving, protecting E911 and public safety is something that our members care deeply about. And so we'll be there for you to support as you try to shape those transitions and the funding and non-deployment for public safety.
Well, I appreciate that. It's important. And this is a bipartisan issue. I mean, we've got a lot of Democrat support for Next Gen 911. And so I'm hopeful that we can, the legislation is actually moving through the committee now. And we've kind of had an agreement. We'll keep moving it, even though we haven't figured out the funding piece. But we're having productive discussions now. So that's one where I really feel like we'll get there.
Well, we want to work with you closely on doing so. one of the things as the administration does the AI action plan and the AI executive orders, making sure that the BEAD funding tries to create incentives for states to all win the race on AI, not to do things that would delay or not only the deployment and the permitting of the AI infrastructure, but also the deployment of the models. Another issue that the administration has really promoted is to not have our friends in Europe and other places impose fees on telecommunications or American technology companies. Any comment on both the national framework for AI, the administration's work, and how the committee is trying to support that?
Yeah, so the committee is working now on trying to figure out what that national framework should look like. And Jay Obernolte heading a bipartisan task force that's working on this. He knows more about AI than anybody else in Congress. So he's the right guy. And that committee is working in a bipartisan fashion. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move forward on that. That's important because you've got different states with different regulations, kind of a patchwork. And as is the case in a lot of things, and if you basically end up having a national standard set by whichever state is the most restrictive, and so we don't want to be in that situation. We want to have a national framework so that folks can innovate and not have to worry about this patchwork and trying to figure that out. So it's important that we get there, and I think we understand that, and I'm encouraged that that's moving in a bipartisan way right now. As far as international, it's really important, and the Trump administration gets it, which is important. I think using trade policy, carrot and stick, is one way that the Trump administration is addressing this. I think the other is we just have to engage. The American needs to engage, and we need to be on the same page when we go to these international conferences, as we're setting these international frameworks and standards. American and basically the West needs to be on the same page. And so a lot of conversations are happening now between us and our European colleagues. I've got a meeting in Vienna in February where this will be one of the main topics. We have to be on the same page so that China doesn't set the standards. If China sets the standards, then that's bad for the U.S. It's bad for the West. And so the good news is this administration understands that. I think we in Congress understand that. And so we're working hard to try to build consensus ahead of these. There's a big international conference this year and another one next year that it'll be important that we show up with a unified voice.
One final question. What can we do to help you achieve your mission? And as we look at, we often come to you and ask you for this policy, for this legislation. Not too long ago, one of our member companies made a set of community commitments as to how they will deploy their data centers, not impose any cost of energy, not have any net loss of water, what they'll do for the communities where they deploy. What are the things we can do to create best practices, best commitments, to create the trust that will help you do your job? And is any advice to our members?
Yeah.
As we build the infrastructure that the country needs so badly.
Yeah. Well, you're my heroes. I mean, your member companies are the ones who are out there on the front lines, making it happen. I mean, we're gonna win the race to AI. We're gonna win the race to 6G. Because of your member companies and the folks in this room, and so thank you for taking the risk, making the investment. And I think the best thing you can do is tell your story. I mean, continue to engage with policymakers on our committee, but also the folks who aren't on our committee who don't maybe look at these issues every single day, helping them understand why permitting reform is so important. Tell your specific stories of how projects have been held up. Talk about the impact you're having on the communities where you're going. I mean, we just had a groundbreaking on a data center in North Carolina, the Amazon, and what they're doing in the local community with the school system, with the community college, the investments that are being made locally is incredible, and what a great story to tell. And so I would just say, tell your story, and you know, it's help build more allies for us in Congress who understand not only how important this is, but where we need to go and how we need to get there, and that'll help me be more successful getting legislation passed. And I appreciate the dialogue we have, you know, and let's keep that going. And where you see me screwing up, let me know. And if you see me missing something, you know, help me understand, because you know we're talking about doing a hearing later in the year just about the evolving marketplace and telecom. I mean, just it's remarkable how quickly things are changing and how innovation is changing the way people interface, and it's an exciting time we're in. But we as policymakers have got to get this right. And again, it's don't overregulate to stifle what's happening, but figure out what we can do to streamline and make it make sure we're doing it fast as we can possibly do it, but also protecting the public. And you know, what are the guardrails that are necessary? And y'all know those better than we do. So you're being engaged like you are is really important to our success.
Well, we're grateful for your leadership. We're grateful that you travel the country and that you hear not only from your constituents in North Carolina, but as members that you're trying to help get reelected. You're hearing the concerns all across the country. You're doing a tremendous job. We're thankful for your leadership on the committee. We'll keep coming to see and tell our story and ask for help along the way. But we also want to make the commitments to the country, to our communities that we serve, in a way that helps build the trust and the case that you need to make the policy. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Chip and Chairman Hudson. Yes, this is your book. We all have books. So I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to introduce Commissioner Trustee. I kind of feel silly telling you all about her resume because I'm sure you already know it, but I'll just hit some of the highlights. She is the newest commissioner at the FCC, and we're so pleased that she's part of our program today because she brings a really fresh perspective based on her experience on the Hill. As you know, she was nominated by President Trump and confirmed by the US Senate last June. And prior to joining the commission, Commissioner Trustee had tremendous Hill experience. And one thing that I find interesting and kind of unique is that she's got a significant background in national security based on her experience working on the Armed Services Committee with Senator Wicker. And of course, we have great affection for anybody that has anything to do with Mississippi. Here at Encompass, it gets you in the door automatically. So that's fantastic. Yes. She also worked for the Senate Commerce Committee and the House Energy and Commerce Committee. So she's been there and she's seen everything behind the scenes in a SCIF and now at the FCC. So please join me in welcoming Commissioner Trustee. And I'm going to ask you one question, maybe you could answer at the end. If you please let us know how we can assist you in your job at the FCC following the end of your remarks or at the beginning. I think that would be really helpful. So thank you, everybody, and please join me in welcoming.
Well, thank you, Stacy, for that very, very kind introduction. I'll say at the outset, the best way to come to us is just to come to us and to let us know what's going on in your world, where we can be helpful, be specific, and we have an open door policy and are always happy to meet with you. So thank you again for that introduction, and thank you to Encompass for the invitation to speak today. It's a pleasure to be with so many innovators, with so many builders and problem solvers who are shaping the future of communications in this country. I also want to thank the entire Encompass team for your leadership and for the work you do every day to advance competition, innovation, and connectivity. Encompass has long been a constructive and pragmatic voice in the communications industry and in policy, and I've personally valued your continued contribution and engagement, especially at a time when technology, markets, and policy are evolving at extraordinary speed. I also want to acknowledge Encompass member companies who are not merely participants in the communications marketplace. You are truly the builders of it. You deploy networks, you push technology forward, and you drive competition in the communications marketplace in a way that benefits consumers, businesses, and the broader economy. And so it is fitting that today I want to talk about the enduring relationship between competition and innovation in communications and what that means as we enter an era that will be increasingly shaped by artificial intelligence. If you span the history of telecommunications, whether we're talking about voice, video, or data, long distance or local service, wired or wireless, one theme stands out: competition. Indeed, over time, communications policy in the United States has increasingly focused on promoting competition where we have more providers, more choices for consumers, and better quality services. To achieve those objectives, efforts within Congress and at the FCC have been dedicated to opening markets, lowering barriers to entry, and leveraging market forces, not bureaucratic mandates, to drive innovation. With laws like the 1992 Cable Act or Congress granting the FCC General Spectrum Auction Authority in 1993. The statutory focus on competition didn't begin with the enactment of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, but the 96 Act crystallized it. The idea was straightforward. When providers compete, consumers benefit through lower prices, better service, and faster deployment of new technologies. In shaping these legislative directives, Congress also recognized that competition is not static. It requires ongoing attention to market structure, entry barriers, and incentives for investment. The goal in that respect was not competition for its own sake, but competition as a means to promote innovation and serve the public interest. And that vision has largely proved correct. Competition has helped lay the foundation for nationwide wireless connectivity. It has supported investments in high-speed broadband networks that power our economy today. And it has encouraged experimentation, new business models, new services, and new ways of reaching consumers. Now, Encompass has been part of that story from the beginning. Your members have consistently shown that competitive providers can challenge incumbents, deploy infrastructure in hard-to-reach places, and deliver meaningful alternatives to consumers and enterprises alike. At the same time, it's fair to say that competition and innovation have taken forms that policymakers in the 1990s could not have fully anticipated. Back then, communications policy was often organized around silos: local versus long distance, wireline versus wireless, voice versus data. Today, consumers don't think in those terms. They want options, flexibility, and reliability. The market also tells us consumers want fiber connections at home and at work. They want fixed wireless where it makes sense. They want satellite services to reach rural, remote, and underserved areas. And they want reliable broadband on the go. Voice service, once the centerpiece of communications regulation, is increasingly just another application riding over broadband networks. Video is no longer limited to broadcast television or traditional multi-channel video providers. Streaming services now play a central role in how Americans access content on their schedules, on their devices, and on their own terms. This evolution has brought forth enormous benefits for consumers. Choice drives innovation, and innovation drives better outcomes. But it also challenges regulators to keep pace, to avoid outdated assumptions, and to ensure that our policy frameworks reflect how networks and services actually function today, not how they functioned decades ago. For regulators, that sometimes means asking difficult questions. Are our rules technology neutral? Do they promote investment rather than discourage it? Do they recognize convergence rather than reinforce silos? These questions matter even more as we look forward to the next major technological shift. That brings me to the intersection that I want to focus on this morning: competition, innovation, and the future of artificial intelligence. AI has the potential to be one of the most transformative technologies of our time. We're already seeing its impact across sectors, from healthcare and education to manufacturing, logistics, and national security. AI tools can increase productivity, improve decision-making, enhance network operations, and unlock new forms of creativity and economic growth. Encompass's launch of its AI Competition Center reflects an important truth. How AI develops will depend in large part on whether markets remain competitive, trusted, and dynamic. Concentration, whether in the computing power to run AI, data, or connectivity, can limit innovation and raise barriers to entry. Competition, by contrast, creates pressure to improve performance, reduce costs, and expand access. It helps ensure that AI's benefits are not confined to a few firms or a few geographies, but are widely shared. But for AI to deliver on its promise, one foundational requirement must be met: universal, high-quality connectivity. AI does not exist in a vacuum. It relies on networks that are fast, resilient, and ubiquitous. Universal connectivity is essential if all Americans are to benefit from artificial intelligence. That means continued investment in fiber networks deployed by incumbents and competitive providers. It also means embracing innovative offerings that use fixed wireless, satellite, and other technologies to extend high-capacity services to every corner of the country. And connectivity for AI is not just about fixed access. Increasingly, AI will be mobile. We will interact with AI not only at desktops, but through smartphones, vehicles, and other connected devices. That reality places new demands on mobile networks and underscores the importance of robust wireless infrastructure. Competition plays a critical role here too. Competitive providers push the entire ecosystem to build better networks capable of handling AI's demand for higher speeds, lower latency, and greater capacity across the last mile, the middle mile, and the backbone. AI also raises the stakes for network resiliency, security, and redundancy. As more economic and social activity depends on AI-enabled services, network outages become more costly. Redundancy, multiple paths, diverse providers, and resilient and secure architectures become not a luxury, but indeed a necessity. Competitive networks contribute directly to that resilience. Domestically, they provide alternative routes and architectures. Globally, they play a critical role in areas like submarine cable deployment, ensuring that data flows are diverse, secure, and robust. Here again, Encompass members bring valuable expertise. Many of you have spent years deploying networks in communities where you did not have pre-existing relationships or legacy advantages. You built trust, navigated local processes, and developed practical know-how for building infrastructure. That experience will matter not only for networks that support AI, but also for the broader AI ecosystem, data centers, edge facilities, and the power capacity needed to support them. Building AI infrastructure will also require coordination across sectors, and competitive providers are well-positioned to be leaders in that effort. Let me turn now to what the FCC is doing and what we should continue to do to support competition and innovation in this evolving technological landscape. First, permitting and access to rights of way remains critical. Through the Build America agenda, The Commission is focused on reducing unnecessary delays and costs associated with network deployment. Pole attachment reform and streamlined permitting processes are not abstract policy issues. They directly affect how quickly and efficiently networks can be built. Second, we need an all of the above approach to spectrum policy: licensed, unlicensed, shared, satellite spectrum. Each plays an important role. Mid-band spectrum in particular is essential to delivering high-capacity broadband services. Making more spectrum available for commercial use under clear and predictable rules supports both competition and innovation. Third, the Commission continues to advance the IP transition. Moving away from legacy technologies can improve resiliency and reliability, enable new services, and support efforts like robocall prevention. At the same time, businesses need sufficient certainty and predictability to make long-term investment decisions. Getting the balance right is essential to our continued economic prosperity. Fourth, we are streamlining submarine cable licensing. Given the global nature of data flows and AI workloads in particular, efficient and secure deployment of undersea infrastructure is more important than ever. Fifth, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity remains a shared responsibility. The FCC's role is not in incident response, but it is in network reliability, resilience, and continuity of service. Public-private partnerships are essential to securing our networks while still enabling continued deployment and innovation. And six, in light of President Trump's recent executive order on artificial intelligence, I expect the Commission to consider how best to approach issues like AI transparency and disclosure, and whether federal action can provide clarity and avoid a patchwork of conflicting state requirements that impede innovation and US leadership. To ensure our rules keep pace with marketplace developments, the Commission has a responsibility to track the impact of our policies on competition and innovation and identify areas where more work remains. This requires data and an analytical approach that considers both where we've been and where we're headed. This year's FCC Communications Marketplace Report provides a timely and valuable opportunity for the Commission to make these assessments. In addition to evaluating the state of competition in the communications marketplace in all of its forms, unlike more siloed inquiries, this report, required under the law, invites a broad examination of deployment, investment, and marketplace dynamics. It also creates and requires careful evaluation of barriers to entry, particularly for entrepreneurs and small businesses. As AI becomes more deeply integrated into our communications networks and services, those barriers and opportunities will increasingly include AI infrastructure and capabilities. The Communications Marketplace Report also provides an opportunity for continued dialogue with Congress. The FCC is already taking steps under our existing statutory authority to promote robust, secure, and resilient communications infrastructure needed to support AI. And we are carefully considering the ways in which AI itself may intersect with our authorities, such as in the robocall context. Moreover, as the President noted in his AI executive order, working collaboratively with Congress can help maximize our ability to get regulatory policy right and ensure US leadership in artificial intelligence. Whether that involves new authorities related to the communications infrastructure that supports artificial intelligence, tools that enable AI experimentation by small businesses and entrepreneurs, or other measures. The FCC's data, analysis, and policy expertise can help Congress build on efforts already underway through the White House AI Action Plan and beyond. My hope is that future marketplace reports will lean in to these issues and provide policymakers, industry, and the public with a clear-eyed assessment of how competition is evolving and what steps might be needed to ensure it continues to thrive. Finally, let me close where I began. Competition and innovation have been central to communications policy for decades. They are not ends in themselves, but means to deliver better outcomes for consumers, for businesses, and for our economy. As we enter the AI era, the partnership between competition and innovation becomes even more important. AI's promise will depend on open markets, robust networks, and policies that encourage innovation and investment rather than entrenchment. Encompass and its member companies have a critical role to play in that future. I look forward to continuing to work with you to hear your ideas, your concerns, and your solutions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
I want to thank Commissioner Trustee for a great address and just thank her for her service and the work that she is doing at the commission. I now want to call up Congressman Greg Landsman from Cincinnati, who serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee.
Thank you.
So as we were waiting to come out, I was talking to the congressman. We have a number of things in common. Rob Portman, who is from Cincinnati and was in the Senate and in the House from Cincinnati. Your district is a little bit different than his old district, right? But we both married into the same family. And as we set up the AI Competition Center, we asked Rob Portman and the Portman Center at the University of Cincinnati to serve on our advisory committee. And so I got to go out and meet with the students and the leadership and someone who heads up the national security, cybersecurity aspects of AI, Richard Hartnett at the University of Cincinnati. And so Cincinnati is a beautiful town, good people.
Anyone from Cincinnati? Close enough. You were born there. Cincinnati is the greatest city in America. And it's one thing that we all have in common as Cincinnatians. We believe that in our core. We've been to every city, enough cities, and we're convinced that Cincinnati is the greatest. Yeah.
And
it's pretty great.
And one day it'll win a Super Bowl.
Yeah. One day. It's painful. It is painful.
But the other thing that we have in common, I served in Congress with Ted Strickland. You worked for Ted.
Many years.
A little bit. Yeah. Talk a little bit. You led his faith and community outreach and initiative. What did that look like?
So I got a master's. I worked on the Hill for a couple years and then decided I needed to go and explore the world a little bit and got a master's in theological studies and graduated. And I had worked for Governor Ted Strickland when he was a member of Congress, and then he became governor, and he had this office, as many governors do, an office of faith-based and community initiatives, and he really wanted to do something different. And so he asked me to come back. I'm Jewish, and so I think I'm the only Jewish person to run an office of faith-based and community initiatives, which was really exciting. And we made it about a couple things that we wanted to solve. We wanted to really improve outcomes for formerly incarcerated people when they come back. A lot of faith-based organizations were doing great work in helping people get back on their feet, finding housing, finding a job, just sort of wrapping an entire community around an individual who really usually when they come back from being incarcerated don't have much, if anything, or anyone. And we started to invest in that, summer learning programs for kids. So many churches and synagogues do these incredible summer programs where kids get to go and they get caught up. And that gets overlooked a lot of times, even though they're catching kids up on reading and math and all these other things. And so that's what it was several years of finding these really incredible investments in people and Ohioans and community and you know, making those investments. And the office had really struggled for years, and we were able to sort of get it back on its feet, and we helped, you know, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people all over the state. It was great.
So former staffer, community leader for the governor of the state, you come to Congress, you're on the Energy and Commerce Committee, the best committee in Congress. And we're coming out of COVID, and America on a bipartisan basis makes a commitment to connect every American to high-speed, reliable, affordable internet. Talk about your priorities on the committee and where the BEAD program and the goal and objectives of that, where does that fit in your overall priority?
So it's a big priority for me in terms of you know, getting the country building again and building more quickly. You know, the vision of connecting every American is I think is so important, in that, you know, having a big lofty national goal is so, you know, is something we did, and I'm not sure we do as much of it as we used to, or at least I would like to see us do more. To say, you know, for example, on education, every kid's got to get caught up. You mentioned COVID. I mean, you know, we've got so many kids who have fallen behind, and there should be a national effort to get every single child caught up. And you can sort of make those declarative you know, goals or initiatives across the board. Very important. And that, I think that's the kind of a leadership we need. And we had that in broadband. And then we overlooked how broken government was in so many regards. But as it relates to building, over the years, you all know this, you know, there were good intentions layered on good intentions, layered on good intentions, and that made it very difficult to build just about anything of substance here in the United States. And so you now have to, you know, remove those layers, and that's the permitting reform. And so on the broadband piece that we took on, and Brad Talber's here with my team, he really led this, really smart guy. He should get some credit. Give him a round of applause. Brad, just trust me. I'm going to tell a story. He did, but you know, the railroads and that the public right of way. I mean, in order to get broadband to different people, you're inevitably going to cross a railroad, and these are, you know, private companies who see that little intersection as a profit center. Right. And so they were just messing with these broadband companies, saying like, hey, you got to pay more, you got to pay more, you got to pay more. And it was causing all these delays, and this was a huge problem. And so our bill, which we think will get to the floor and pass, you know, says, look, you can't treat it like a profit center anymore. This is a public right of way. And so you've got to approve the broadband, you know, construction, you know, very quickly. We gave them a short period of time, and we expect them to get through your sort of right away, your little piece of the world very quickly. And we think that will make a big difference in terms of getting broadband out to more people all over the country.
And let me just say, as we were trying to find a bipartisan sponsor for the Rail Act, Congressman Landsman and his staff, yeah, Brad, it made a tremendous difference. Like once we had a bipartisan leader, then the Rail Act being included in the broadband package in the Energy and Commerce Committee, and the Senate getting bipartisan sponsorship, and now having champions on both sides, House and Senate. And let me tell you, taking on railroads, as many of y'all know in this room, is not easy.
Can I just say one quick thing? When they came to me and they said, look, there's this bill, but you know, it includes the railroads, and my eyes got real big, and I said, like, are we helping or are we taking them on? And they were like, we're taking them on. I was like, say no more. I'm in. It's just so much fun. I know it's a lot, but I'm in.
It's good to find someone both compassionate and courageous in Congress. And it really helps us as we look at the prospect of getting the broadband permitting bill done. And within that, the Rail Act, which has been, it's just been a regulatory hole or gap because no one has jurisdiction. And we have all of these horror stories of railroads holding up crossings 18 months, charging exorbitant rates, 40, 60,000 more just to cross in one place. And as you know, in many communities, Jackson, Mississippi, other places like Cincinnati, the railroad is a lot of times the dividing line between the communities that have broadband and those who don't. And to be able to close the digital divide, we have to be able to cross the railroad track in most places. The other major impediment is we try to have long route connectors connecting the new hubs of data centers and AI. The railroad also is a huge barrier and delay in being able to bring fiber to the data center as well as fiber to the home. So your leadership is greatly appreciated. And so we'll talk a little bit more about other priorities that you have. Not the BEAD Act is now most states, 43 of the 50 states have been approved, their plans approved. We hope that soon shovels will be in the ground. But then there's a $15 to $20 billion non-deployment level of funding still left. Do you have any priorities of where you want to see those resources targeted? We just talked with Congressman Hudson, who was talking about E911 and being able to make sure that advanced public safety applications are preserved in the transition from the old networks to the new. Do you have any priorities in that category?
Yeah, I mean, my first priority is get the money out the door. I mean, that we have got to do a better job of deploying. The name is ironic, right? Deploying deployment dollars. The dollars have to get out the door, and I still have concerns, as I know we all do, around BEAD and making sure that it actually, it's starting to pick up, but it requires dedicated leadership, and I think an ongoing attention from the United States Congress, from Energy and Commerce, to keep the dollars rolling out the door, that there are benchmarks and they're constantly hitting them. I just think that's the phase we're in. And when there are issues that if we need to address them, we've got to do it quickly. And so that to me is a top priority, which is BEAD implementation, that we're constantly working this problem until every dollar is spent and, all of these homes are connected. I think the affordability, the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program was a big deal. And it's a shame that Congress let it lapse. It's really important to help people at this point pay for this stuff. It just makes a big difference. And so there are a lot of families that need help paying for this. And so I would love to see dollars be used to help folks pay for it. I got to tell you, there's a, part of what is in the non-deployment funding plan is, literacy training. Do you see this? It's like, it's like saying to somebody, we're going to train you on get an iPhone, but you don't get an iPhone. We're just going to train you on it. And sometimes these programs, these trainings, they sound good, or, but the fact of the matter is that you really need the thing. And so the ACP or some version of that to help people pay for this or subsidize it so they can afford it makes all the sense in the world. I do like Chairman Hudson's idea of helping with the public safety piece and FirstNet. So I think there will be bipartisan opportunities there.
And on the overall permitting, do you think that we'll see the package pass the House? And I know the Senate is always somewhat unpredictable.
On our bill?
On the rail and then the broader broadband. And then later tomorrow or this afternoon, we'll have Congressman Latta and talking about the energy and the permitting reform package on that side of the data center, on the energy network and deployments.
I mean, I think the bipartisan bills have a better chance because of the 60 vote threshold in the Senate, right? So, there have been a mix really of permitting reform bills that are bipartisan. I suspect those will move forward. I would hope. And then there are some that are that were passed in a partisan way. Those will be harder on the Senate side. But yes, I'm hopeful. I'm not. There's a real commitment. I think a growing energy to in terms of permitting reform in the House. And I don't know whether or not that's true in the Senate. I don't know if there's the same sort of energy and excitement and interest as there is in the House. I just don't know.
Earlier you were talking about how many times with good intentions, we've made it more difficult to build things in America, whereas building houses, our broadband, our energy transmission grid, pipelines. How much does that type of difficulty in building, how does that play into the affordability debate that's going around the country?
Well, it's a huge deal, right? So because supply and demand, that sets prices. Although with such consolidation, in terms of who's selling what, oftentimes they have the ability, these companies, to set prices outside of what typically happens in a competitive marketplace, right? Which is if you have this much demand and you can meet it from a supply standpoint, you get a good, decent price and people get, something they can afford. If the supply side, and now feel like I'm just reiterating things I learned in economics, but on the supply side, if it's not there, which you're seeing in housing in particular, and you're seeing it in some parts of healthcare, but certainly in broadband, it becomes much more expensive. Now, the reason why I think the bipartisan piece is so important, one is it's the only way I think to pass stuff, right? If you want it, you can pass partisan stuff in the House, but if you want it to pass the Senate, it's got to be bipartisan. So if you want it to actually become law, bipartisanship is the way to go in this Congress, and I think that's going to be true for the next couple of years. It is also true that the layers of good intention, those were most likely, I bet you, if we were to, start to look at the layers, those were well-intentioned partisan measures. And, meaning that somebody thought, gosh, we got to save this, or we got to protect this group, or we have to make sure this is, and it was very, well-intentioned. Had it been bipartisan, it would have been nuanced enough, in my opinion, to not be a barrier to building. And so when we go and do permitting reform, the other reason bipartisanship is so important is because, one, you want to get the policy right so that when you take out a layer or you adjust a layer, you're doing it wisely. And if it's bipartisan, no one's going to go and put the layer back, right? Or the likelihood of somebody coming back and saying, we're going to add this layer back, goes down because it's bipartisan. If we keep doing things in a partisan way, you're just going to see the layers be removed and then put back, is my worry.
So this gets me to my last question, and it's kind of a broad and big framework question. Tonight, we'll celebrate the 30th anniversary of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. You talked about the Energy and Commerce Committee. Historically, it has been very bipartisan on big things. And so your bipartisan leadership on the Rail Act is a continuation of that legacy. When you leave the Energy and Commerce Committee, whenever that might be, is there any big thing that you wish to be a part of in setting the framework of the future? Is it an AI national framework? Is it how to build things? If you could define
the two big things for me are, we have to fix healthcare, and we need a healthcare system in this country that works for everybody. So that's number one. I want to be part of that. Two, we have got to take on and rein in big tech and AI. I just, thank you so much. Yeah, it just, the AI piece is obviously the innovation is important. It's going to be there. If anyone has ever, I got stuck on the plane the other night. I was flying out west. Do I have a minute for a story? Okay. And you get the Wi-Fi. This a 5-6 hour flight, felt like 12 hours. And I sent a note to my staff and I said, hey, I'm very bored. Can you all send me work? And a few people did, and then it just went quiet. I think they were just like, you're bothering us. And then my family stopped talking to me. Nobody, I'm just sitting on this plane. I've run out of work. Nobody, my son's not answering. Nobody's answering my text. So I had a couple questions that were running around in my head. And I went ahead and I opened up ChatGPT and I started a conversation. And it was one of the best conversations I've had with anyone ever in my life. And this is so terrifying that the plane landed and I thought to myself, how do I keep this conversation going? I feel, I was learning so much and it's so encouraging and I'm just feeling so good about myself. So I don't think that AI and big tech need as much help from us as they say they do. The American people, workers, our children, they need protection. And so I think that's the big thing is to protect us from this. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate your years of service, where you are right now, your leadership right now, and I look forward to working with you on the implementation of BEAD and the passing of the Rail Act and the permitting package. So thank you.
Thank you. Right. Thank you all.
All right. You're up. Yes, you go ahead and get started. Just keep it running.
All right. Good morning, everyone. We're actually a little bit early, but welcome. My name is Drew Clark. I'm CEO of Broadband Breakfast, and I'm happy to welcome you to a joint live stream of Broadband Breakfast Live Online, our weekly free webcast that's available. Normally, we're at 12 noon Eastern time on Wednesdays, but we accommodated, I think it was 2 members of Congress, a FCC commissioner, and 7 members of Congress after us. So we had to have a little dose of humility and move our time to 10 a.m. But this session, of course, is being live streamed through broadbandbreakfast.com. If you're not familiar with Broadband Breakfast, I hope you will be after today and tomorrow because we're here. We're really happy to be partners with INCOMPAS and participate in this session at the INCOMPAS Policy Summit. I'm about to introduce our panel and our topic, but I just also want to say 1 or 2 more words about the weekly events we've been doing for nearly 6 years. And even though Broadband Breakfast existed before the pandemic, it was the pandemic that turbocharged some of the engagement that we hopefully help facilitate, bringing people together every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time in a free conversation all about better broadband, better lives. We've been familiar and engaged with Encompass priorities and events in the past. They've been no stranger to Broadband Breakfast Live Online. And when we had this opportunity to work together, we thought, what a great no-brainer. Because the thing we're about to talk about, broadband permitting and infrastructure deployment, is really central. It's central to getting that better broadband out there and to making sure it can translate to better lives for everyone who makes use of the communications capacity. Let's go ahead and introduce our panel. We're not going to say a lot about them. You can find their bios on the Encompass website and also on Broadband Breakfast website. But I'm actually going to kind of kickstart it. We'll just go straight down the line. And I want to begin with the question for each of you from your perspective. What is the scale of the challenge on broadband permitting and deployment that we're about to face? And how do you approach this question? So, David, kick us off.
All right. Thank you very much, Drew. I appreciate you facilitating this discussion. Thank you for bringing the Broadband Breakfast audience to join us as well. And also thank you to C-SPAN for being here today and recording this event as well. Permitting is a significant challenge still today to get broadband to all unserved and underserved locations. It's the biggest hurdle that we face in trying to deploy fiber broadband at Unity, which is both a consumer, business, and wholesale provider of fiber services across the U.S.
Awesome. And just one more quick word about Unity, because you told me an interesting story beforehand. How would you characterize the role you play in the industry at the moment?
Yeah, Unity, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, we are a premier insurgent fiber provider. We completed our merger with Windstream in August of last year. And so we provide fiber broadband to the home to approximately 2 million locations in 18 states, primarily rural areas, which are very expensive to serve. Then on the wholesale side, we provide fiber services to wireless carriers, data centers, hyperscalers, landing stations along the coast and so forth. And then as a business fiber provider, in addition to managed services, we serve businesses, government agencies, schools, hospitals all across the U.S.
Great. Good to see who we're speaking to and how you come at this issue. Becky, tell us a little bit about your role as Associate General Counsel at Crown Castle and the particular window you have on permitting.
Sure. So my team supports our deployment efforts both on the wireline and the wireless side. And so we look at small wireless facilities, we look at fiber, not to the home, but and we are challenged daily by our municipal partners and some of the other regimes, including utilities, et cetera. And we work with both communities, utilities, and other stakeholders in order to deploy timely, efficiently, and make sure that our stakeholders and our communities are getting the returns that they need.
And same question for you that I asked David. Crown Castle, I don't know, I was almost thinking there's the word tower in there because I'm so associated with towers, but you're obviously much more than a tower company. Could you just speak to that role you play in the ecosystem, Becky?
Sure. I have a team that actually supports the environmental aspect of towers, but all of our facilities and infrastructure really works together. And it's in synthesis. So we have 40,000 towers, but we also have about 125,000 small cells and also about 80,000 route miles of fiber that all work together.
Wonderful. And thank you for being with us, Becky. Ben Sanborn, Senior Counsel. We got the two lawyers together. No, probably more lawyers. But Ben, tell us a little bit about who Conterra Networks is and how you interface with the permitting and infrastructure deployment challenges.
Sure. Thank you. Conterra Networks is a provider of fiber and broadband. We started out with wireless deployments to small rural schools. We do a lot of E-rate work. We have evolved where we are now doing fiber deployment beyond our central location in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we began. We now have significant operations in Louisiana and Texas, and we actually have some presence in about 20 states at this point, but those are our three major markets. And what we're really transitioning towards is enterprise deployment of fiber. We do focus because we started with an E-rate background where we were going to rural schools that didn't have any connectivity. We do still have a lot of focus in some rural areas, And so for us permitting, the key issue is how do we get the deployment where as we're moving towards more robust fiber for all of these, whether it's schools and libraries or enterprise customers. We do a lot of city government. How do we get those facilities to these locations in a timely and affordable manner? And that's where permitting impacts both of those things. And our biggest issue, well, railroad is our biggest issue, but beyond that, our biggest issue is consistency, where we deal with a lot of smaller and varied municipalities who all have slightly different rules. And the question is, how do we streamline these so we can work with these communities, because we consider them integral partners with what we do? How do we work with them in a way where their needs are met, but our needs for speed and affordability are met as well? So that's our perspective.
Awesome. Thanks for anticipating the what are your pain points question. So we got two concrete pain points there. Ariane Schaefer of G Fiber, great to have you on this panel. We've obviously had you on panels about underground and locates, and you're obviously, deeply involved in these questions. How do you, from your vantage point, see the challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, I mean, first, everything Ben said continues to be a challenge. I would start when we're talking about permitting, we're talking about working with our long-term partners. Us on the panel, we're investing millions of dollars in the ground or on poles in these communities. And so we want to establish a strong working relationship, one, out of the goodness of our hearts, and two, for the bottom line. And the reliability and the predictability is really important. And so understanding that some folks in the West might have more rules around water, and folks in the Midwest might have more rules around like tornadoes, other natural disasters. Rather than asking, and diminishing the reality that those are needed in those communities, we are asking, though, for transparency so that we can at least have a sense up front of the things that is going to be required from the companies so that we can proactively get what is needed by our community partners up front. Where we run into challenges with permitting is when it gets stalled in an area that we didn't know existed or for an unknown amount of time for an unexplained reason. And so the more predictability and communication we can have with these permitting processes, knowing they're going to look different in every community, is continuing to be the most important.
Awesome. Thank you, Ariane. And last but not least, Brendan West, CEO of Fibercom Engineering. One of these things is not like the other. No, just kidding. We're happy to have the very important consultants and engineering firms. Tell us a little bit about how you see this and how you help alleviate pain points for others.
Yeah, thank you. It's a unique perspective because I personally and most of our employees deal with it every single day. We're within the municipalities, in front of pole owners, and it's not a hurdle, it's a wall right now. And with the time frame that we have with BEAD coming up, that wall is going to hinder progress to get it done within the time frame that we're going to need to have it all done by. And I think a lot of it is concerns that they're just not educated and understand what's coming into their communities. And I think, when it comes to the permitting, is that it's a unique monster, and it's still a manual process that takes a lot of bodies, a lot of time, and a lot of details. And we're all scrounging for resources. So I think it's a tiered issue of not just getting permits approved, but it's educating, having the resources, and understanding what's actually coming in. And I think that falls on us a little bit, but also the municipalities and, state, federal governments need to really understand what we're trying to accomplish and what we're bringing to our country.
So I told our panel ahead of time that we were going to try to focus on solutions and things that are good. But here I am asking about all these pain points and the problems. And I'm asking another one right now. How much can the FCC help? And I guess the second point is, how much will they help? And they probably want to help, but can they? Because there's a lot of non-federal issues here. So again, let's kind of go down the line and talk about the FCC proceedings and where they stand and how you view them. So, David.
Oh, sure. I mean, the FCC can help tremendously. And I was very encouraged to hear Commissioner Trustee this morning in her remarks. And that was very refreshing to hear because anything that we can do to speed up the process, anything that we can do to provide certainty to these companies who are spending millions and millions of dollars to deliver fiber broadband is very helpful. And so I think the FCC has a very important role to play as well. I was also encouraged by Chairman Hudson's comments earlier this morning, where he's cautiously optimistic that we can see permitting reform get across the finish line this year. That's very important. And I appreciate all of the emphasis that Encompass has put on the permitting issue over the past year, 2 years. Just having that spotlight is very helpful in trying to move forward the process to deliver fiber broadband.
And by the way, we don't not everyone needs to answer every question. We'll never get through it. And we at Broadband Breakfast Live Online, we like to take lots of questions. We probably won't get as many in this time, but if you have them on our live audience, you can interact through the broadbandbreakfast.com site, and hopefully they'll make their way here. But whoever does want to weigh in, please do on the FCC. So Rebecca.
Sure, I'm happy to weigh in. We have at least contributed to our comments and reply comments in 4 separate proceedings that the FCC has initiated recently in order to help streamline, continue evolving toward a better permitting system. And I really applaud them for that. I think we do just in general. But, there's a NIPA proceeding that's out there. There's a wireline NOI. There's a wireless NPRM. And then there's also continued pole attachment reform from a docket way back in 2017. But we have achieved so many improvements. I think the FCC knew that it was going to be iterative. And so this is kind of the next wave. And I think the more that we're able to explain what the pain points are and maybe propose solutions, the better off we will be in the long run. They've done a great job listening.
Awesome. Ben, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of things. One, I also was struck by Commissioner Trustee's comments, and one of the things that she had mentioned that I thought was interesting was that the executive order from President Trump regarding AI may have actually given them a little more latitude, inviting the FCC to be a little more proactive in some of the issues, because of course with AI, with the data centers, that's a situation where the permitting for both energy and for telecommunications is a significant issue. So they may have recently gotten a little more authority, to your question of what can they do. And with regards to their current proceedings, I think that they do have an important role to play. First is sort of the Section 253 gives them ability to essentially set some guardrails, say there's only so much that municipalities can do before they start to run afoul of the federal requirements. But I think that they have the ability, especially given the role that the Rail Act would give them, they have the ability to really start to work with the communities to say, here's some best practices that we think that communities should adopt, and use that as sort of a safe harbor. And by creating safe harbors, as opposed to trying to mandate specific requirements, the FCC can actually push a lot of positive reform for permitting that is going to address perhaps some of the bipartisan concerns that Congressman Hudson brought up, where there's an issue of, are you taking away the rights of communities if you're establishing sort of a federal standard for permitting?
And just quickly, the safe harbor is for what? What do you need to do to get in the safe harbor?
The safe harbor would be if a community follows these standards in terms of shot clocks and what they can and can't include in their sort of ancillary requirements for permitting, then you'll be safe and there won't be any challenges. But if you go beyond that, we may have questions as to whether you're in fact consistent with the legal requirements, but we can then argue about it. So the safe harbor gives an easy way for the majority of municipalities to move forward. And I think that's something the FCC can do.
And making it easier for you and others. Ariane and Brendan, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll put a touch on it. I think municipalities and local governments will probably follow suit and jump in a little bit quicker. I think they're more motivated by their own citizens to be able to allow the fiber in. I think the two big pain points that we got to look at is railroad and pole owners. Railroad, you go back to 1862 of the Act, basically the federal government gave, land and all carte blanche to do whatever you want. And they still hold true to that. So I think we really got to look at railroad permits, because a lot of companies are just trying to go around them, or they strategically design their networks differently. And then when it comes to pole owners, the biggest issue is not the poles themselves. A lot are outdated, and then they require the pole to be changed out, although it should have been changed out 20 years before, and they put it on the new attacher. But the big pressing matter is when there's make ready. There's a 3-letter word that, they get 90 days to review it and then 90 days to go out and move it. So right there, if you look at that time frame, it's just slowing everything
half
down.
a year. And make ready, again, I know most of our audience will be familiar with it, but could you just give a little more definition to what that term means exactly?
Yeah. So for example, there's compliancy that you need to have. You need to have separation between comms 12 inches. Comm space needs to be 40 inches below power. So when there's make ready, contractors will go out. They're told to go place it at 24/6. They may put it at 25/7, and they may have put them in violation. So everything needs to be separated properly before the proposed new would attach to the pole. The issue is everyone else on there is in violation, and they all have the option to go and make ready and move it by themselves, instead of just having a uniform, like, all right, the new attacher's coming on, we're not going to charge for it. They can move everyone, put them in compliancy, but no one really wants that because it's not their approved contractor, which slows down deployments and slows down build time. So there's so many different little nuances within permitting just on the pole side.
Yeah.
That takes time.
Well, when you think about everything that has to happen to put fiber on poles, you almost wonder why it ever gets done, right? But I did promise solutions and prospective ways to address the problem. And I know we've got a couple that we've discussed. North Carolina, who wants to speak to that?
I can start. North Carolina has a good statute that's been in place for about 5 years now that explicitly creates a shot clock for municipalities that says that when a permit is submitted, the municipality has 30 days to review it and approve it or reject it. But if it has not been rejected, then it is deemed approved. We think that this is a really good baseline standard. We haven't seen any situations over the past 5 years that this has caused a significant harm. We would note that not every municipality follows it to the letter, but at the same time, as I said earlier, we consider them our partners, so we work with them. We tend not to get too aggressive on that because it does work most of the time. And so we have it out there to say, we have this obligation, but let's talk about what your issue is. One of the odd loopholes is it does not appear to apply to the North Carolina DOT. And so that can have some delays, and it certainly doesn't apply to the railroads, which again, massive pain point. But we think that it creates a good standard, and it's had enough time where it's been working to show that this is a solution that is not going to cause the significant harms that some folks may be worried about.
Yeah, we like that statute in North Carolina, and I think that can easily be applied to other states across the U.S. And to your point, Ben, we have a 5-year track record to show that it works, right, related to it. But Ben also raised another very important point. We need to be good partners with our communities. And so, yes, under the statute, we could come in and flood them with permits to do the whole area, right? That they simply do not have the resources to be able to get that done, especially when you look at the locate issue, which that's one of the biggest issues that we see today in locating the utility line so that we can, and I know there's a statute in North Carolina related to that. Within 3 days, if it's not done, you can still go in and do that. But again, it's very important, and we've touched on it several times. We want to be good partners with the communities where we serve, right? We are bringing a transformative technology to these consumers in rural areas, right? To allow them to participate in this digital economy, to allow them to access better healthcare, because we know the financial strains that are on rural hospitals today. You're going to see more and more telehealth applications, which is another reason why we want to get fiber out as fast as we can to these individuals.
Becky, did you have something positive to say about the landscape and what's good out there that you can point to?
Sure. enjoyed shot clocks on the wireless side for some time now. And so I think it's a logical extension to afford the same treatment to wireline and fiber deployments. One thing that is really critical is the deemed granted or deemed approved. Municipality doesn't always just issue that permit, even though it's deemed approved. So there has to be some solution provided. And so we urge, as states and whomever else is considering these types of remedies, that they include something like that.
All right, and I know you've got 3 municipalities that have done something unique. Do you want to speak to those?
Yeah, I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors last week, and I always am so inspired by the really incredible work that folks are doing and solving huge problems in their communities. The biggest, obviously, being broadband infrastructure deployment. And so it's really wonderful that we discuss it. No, they're talking about a lot of issues. This, of course, being one of them. 3 really stood out to me. 1, we've had experience with deploying, and other 2 I just thought were really interesting. The big problem that this one is solving here, or that these are going to be solving, is the transparency, the tracking, the understanding where your permit is. This is not going to solve some of the preemption or the shot clocks. This just so we're level setting on what this can actually help. Des Moines, Iowa has a customer self-service portal that is highly regarded because it's known as a one-stop shop for transparency. You get real-time tracking, accessibility, in that it offers a searchable database where you can see all of the public and active permits. You don't need a login, really important. And then a centralized communication. If the water district is frustrated at land use, they can discuss it, and you can kind of see where some of those pain points are. Albuquerque, New Mexico, a really interesting place that a lot of folks have been deploying with differing levels of success. Last year, just at this time, they launched what they're calling the Albuquerque Planning and Logistics Network, or ABQ Plan, where they have seen a significant drop in time to review permits. The mayor on stage said this is essentially making it very clear to the folks that work in the permitting offices in his city that we're going to hold ourselves accountable. He admitted it was a little painful at first. Some folks having to be faced with the reality of the long permit times, but within a year, they have seen so much success because they know who to hold accountable and how to address it and uncover some of those issues they might have seen in the past that would have stayed pretty quiet. And finally, the city of Bend, Oregon, in addition to a very public infrastructure tracking program, they have what's called an infrastructure project dashboard. Any infrastructure project is up there with excellent maps, updated, and you can see not only what's going on as a resident in your neighborhood, but as a commercial entity, what's happening, so that if you are, if there's a dig once opportunity to go in and say, oh, the water folks are coming, why don't we go in? And it can help offset costs for digging, but also the paving and closing up the roads on the other end, which can be costly. So some of these really excellent ways that cities have addressed the permitting issues have helped on the private sector side as well for broadband deployment.
And Drew, I have another solution. So if you look at federal land, the Department of Agriculture in late 2024 set up a national broadband team, dedicated resource just to move permits along. Now, it's still a lengthy process on forest land, but that has helped immensely. If we could get something similar within the Bureau of Land Management, that would be very helpful to speed the process along, because what we found from BLM, it's a very decentralized process. Each district kind of does its own thing, and certainly understand all of the issues that are going on within the federal workforce with reorganizations, with reductions in force and so forth. These people are strapped, they are, but we need certainty to finish these build outs in these areas, particularly for federal subsidized awards.
Appreciate all these great solutions. Brendan, I know you've also got kind of a software angle on this. Would you mind speaking to how your software and other software contributes to helping address the permitting question?
Yeah. So look, my business partner, he's been in the industry for 20 years. He ran joint use for 38 states and every single poll for one of the major providers. And from my side, from the engineering, we just saw the same issue. So, we took the tools that were available. We created software called Skyware, not Skynet from the movie, but close enough. But we have Permit IQ, which is our AI based, and AI, it is a hot word. Everyone's saying we use AI, we use AI. We had our own AI. We created it. It's agentic. We put it in a box though. So it's black and white. We don't want it to have the hallucinations. And what we did was it was primarily for joint use, where we can fast track joint use permits, get the requirements. It can be API'd into engines, into all-in-one, into spans. We could API into any of them. But then we kind of thought outside the box, with the AI still in the box, why are we just focusing on joint use? So we're working with a DOT in one of the states across the country. We're not naming it yet because we haven't officially come out together to announce, but where we're going to be able to fast track their DOT on utility permits. And it's going to take the first 3 steps, where it's going to basically kick back a permit if it's missing anything that's incomplete, if it's missing a document, just takes away the personal side. And this isn't to replace jobs. This is to complement these teams, to help them where they can't hire more people because there is no budget. So what this will do is then, if it's approved, it'll go to the next step if it has everything, and it'll actually get to the approver that can basically say, all right, it said it had A, B, C, and D. This looks good for my high level, and it should fast track permitting. So it takes a little while to get it set up because every permitting district and DOT, and they're not supposed to be different within their own DOTs, but every office is different. So we're using this software and using the tools and the technology that's driving our country and basically humanity forward, to use it currently to go with the most manual and headache of a process there is in our industry, which is permitting.
We've got a live question from our audience here, and kind of causes me to turn back to David, because this one says, oh, you guys are talking about municipal, county, DOT, and railroads. What about the federal land management agencies? And in particular, the questioner is raising the issue of environmental assessments and the need to go through expensive environmental assessments. We haven't heard that word yet in our panel, so David, but others too. How does environmental assessments affect broadband deployment?
It delays the process considerably, especially if you're building on federal land and it has to go to an endangered species analysis related to it. That just stretches out the process related to it. And look, I think all of us would agree, we want to be good stewards of the environment. I mean, we live here in this country for a reason, right? But, from what we've seen, if the build is significantly going along the right of way that's there, and it has previously been analyzed or it's been previously disturbed, why can't you have a short process to deem it granted? That sounds reasonable. That sounds like common sense permitting reform.
Becky?
The FCC is trying to do right now within the NEPA item on consideration is going to make common sense determinations about these kinds of things that haven't necessarily been able to be right-sized over time. So I think that proceeding will go far to dealing with some of these issues.
Anyone else want to talk about environment?
I came from the construction side, so the one thing they always want to know is, when your drill is fracking out, what's coming out of it. Well, bentonite is usually 99% of the main, solution that you're using when you're mixing mud to be able to keep the hole open so you can pull duct back. The thing is, bentonite comes from the ground. So the fact that we need to send them basically a chemical makeup of what's coming out of the ground that we're putting in a machine that's going back in the ground slows the process down, and they already have these documents. So why request something that you already have had for the last 20 plus years?
All right, let's talk trash. Railroads. Wait, first, are there any railroads in the room? Seeing none. No, seriously, whenever I hear lots of grousing about railroads, I kind of try to bisect the problem into the parallel on the right of ways that the railroads, whether justly or unjustly, have owned and controlled, and the perpendicular crossing a railroad. We all know, well, maybe we don't know, Ben, kick us off. What are some of the problems that you've encountered with railroads? And again, how can there be solutions?
Yeah, the main issues are the price and the delay, in that there's no incentive for them to change their pricing schedule or their timing. And they're a private entity. This does not help them in any way, so they give it sort of a lower priority. There are some railroads that our current average is 12 to 15 months before we get a response, and the permit costs can be in the tens of thousands of dollars, and it tends to be staggered. It's like $5,000 to submit the application. This isn't the permit cost. That's just to submit the application, and then there will later be permit costs associated with it. And our frustration then is, well, do we know that they actually own in fee simple the right of way? And this sort of gets to the legal question of, do they just have an easement, but really the community still owns it, or do they actually own it? And they tend to be pretty coy about sharing documents that say they own it.
Isn't that a public record?
Yes, but it's trickier than it sounds. It goes back to the issue of it's going to 1846, and I have pulled some where you're reading them, and it's a little odd. It's like 100 steps from Farmer Jones's lot is where we have begun, things like that, where it's not always that clear cut. And so the default tends to be, it's going to take us longer to fight this in court than it is to just sort of go through the process. And that's sort of where we land on a lot of this, is that there may be existing solutions, but the cost of actually doing them, like saying, okay, let's actually do a takings and do an assessment. We're a public utility in most of the locations where we operate. So we could do, and some people have done, essentially eminent domain taking and saying, okay, you're saying it's going to cost us $40,000 for a permit. Well, what's it actually going to cost us if we just take this? Because what we're doing is a corridor of dirt 15 feet under the ground, and it's about 12 inches in diameter and 110 feet long. So we're looking at saying the value of that is not $10,000 or $20,000. So for us to be paying a permit of $40,000 for that seems odd. But then it gets back to what's the time, what's the cost. And so that's where for a very long time, we've just sort of been stuck in a position where, are there potentially ways to get around it? Yes, but are they more costly than just going along? So that's why we really felt we needed some actual legislation to come in and say, okay, this is a situation that's broken, let's fix it.
And the legislation you're talking about is?
The Rail Act, which is
Representative Joyce
introduced and before Congress.
Yes. Yep.
Because that would also add some accountability to the railroads, right, through FCC oversight. Regarding cost, so our average cost for railroad permits vary from $5,000 to $20,000. But here recently, we received 2 permits costs of $70,000 and $110,000 that we're analyzing to determine what's the basis for this cost related to it. The other thing I would say regarding time delays, once you get the permit, then you still have to schedule flaggers before you can do the work. And that puts the process out a little farther, sometimes a month, 2 months, just to get a flagger schedule.
Becky.
I think also, I mean, when you consider the bit by bit that you have to go through to achieve one crossing and do it in an economic manner, our teams are lean, frankly, and each crossing, taking 12 to 15 months and tens of thousands of dollars, it's very, very onerous. So something needs to change.
And I will say the permit process can be complicated with railroads. I learned recently that from one railroad, only 30% of permits that are submitted correctly. Now, that's on us as a provider, right? We need to make sure we're submitting the appropriate permit. But I think you could also make the argument of, well, your permit process must be pretty complex if only 30% are being accepted on the first time.
Please.
I think it's important to understand why we care so much about these railroads, right? We're trying to cross them, but why, right? And my colleague here was explaining, we can go around them, we can, try to find ways, but when you can't, why do we care so much? And the answer is the digital divide. There is no secret in this country. Infrastructure was built among red lines and excluding communities from resources and access. And when these railroads and highways were built many years ago. And then now, I mean, many of us weren't alive when, all of that was happening way, way, way back then. And now, if we are going to go build in the exact same way that, historically has been not so great for many of the communities we're building in, we are then committing the exact same, issues to these communities that they have been receiving for decades. And so that is why we're trying so hard to work with these railroads to pass legislation, is so that we can truly get to the communities on the other side of the track to serve them with high speed, quality, reliable infrastructure. For us, it's broadband. And if we don't solve these problems, the communities that have been faced with these issues for generations will continue to face the same issues for future generations.
Please come back.
And absolutely, I think that's extremely well put. And for us, the practical reality is we now have to look at it and say, can we afford to go across in both time and money? Can we afford to go across this? And if we can't, we've just removed a competitive option from everybody on the other side, the wrong side of the tracks. And is that really good policy for the country?
Have to consider what the highest use of all of the funds that are going into this, whether they're federal funds, whether they're state, whether they're private. What is the highest use? Is it $70,000 to a railroad when that could be used to invest in those networks to connect others? So I think that's a real consideration at this point in time.
Look, we created this monster. Our government did originally, almost 200 years ago. Now it's time to control the monster. It's to bring it back in, bring it back to reality that they are not above everyone and everything. The fact, you hit the point on the flaggers and then the different price points. And then it's not just that, it's the time frame when you're allowed to cross. And then the crews need to be certified to be within the right of way of the railroad. So then the guy literally shows up, you stand there, and he says, don't go there, don't go there. And that was your training. So you have to do all these time frames. So let's put it back in the box, give it some, a little bit more regulation than what they're doing, because right now what they're doing is slowing down. And don't forget, railroads have fiber. So there's some reasons why they don't want you to get fiber in certain areas, because they also sell strands of fiber.
So let's zoom back out for a second. So I think if I'm hearing you correctly, Brendan, you're basically saying, look, this is a job for Congress to solve, because Congress created the problem hundreds of years ago. Okay, so is the federal level the right one, or are there state level approaches that work? We just heard some great state laws. Obviously, we haven't talked about this, but there's been a whole issue in Virginia with a railroad law that didn't end the way that broadband infrastructure builders wanted. Where is the right level to address the permitting / deployment challenges? Is it federal, Congress, FCC, or state? Or even kind of the best practices, the safe harbors we heard from municipalities?
I think it's a mixture. And, a lot of these railroads, they cross multiple states, which then if you think of anything that's criminal, you cross into multiple states, it becomes a federal case. So you could look at it that way. But in the same instances, you don't even know who the railroads are half the time, because they might be, old Baltimore R&R or something like that. And you don't know who actually owns them. And then trying to find out where you contact to permit to cross is also another needle in the haystack. They don't make it easy because they don't want you. It's that simple. They don't want you to go on their right away. And then they make you encase things on both sides, but they don't play by the same rules and make sure that they're encased. There's so many new rules that come up from railroads weekly just to stall it out. And that's what their goal is.
Becky?
I think where we've seen the greatest amount of success, we can look to our sort of the small cell laws and regulations that came out back in 2018, and the efforts to get those types of laws and rules codified in the states as well. I feel like when we have, federal and state level regulations, usually they're working together well, and they sort of serve as checks for each other. Municipalities and other stakeholders are much more reticent to go against the state law and the federal law if they're both in place.
And if I could say one thing on behalf of Unity, we have seen progress in dealing with the railroads over the past year. It's taken a lot of manual effort, and personal visits and things like that. But we are seeing some progress, but there is considerably more to be done.
All right. Did we sufficiently cover sort of the joint agreements, the ways that those facilitate joint use agreements? Is there a legislative fix there, or is that just purely working it out? Go ahead.
In my opinion, it's almost similar to railroads, because if you look at the main pole owners across the country, the big ones, and to be honest, they should follow the lead of a lot of power cooperatives in local EMCs. They can be difficult to work with, but it's because we've been trained from I'll just say it, the Dukes, the Dominions, the AEPs, like trained to do it one way. And it is extremely difficult because half the time they don't even review the permits. It's a third party they've hired to come in and review the permits. And half the time they are electrical engineers that don't understand broadband and understand what we're actually putting on poles. So it's again, it also goes down to education, and it's just people don't know certain things and they just chalk it up as like, all right, well, we're going to just take, 14 days to review it, and then we'll let you know when it comes back. And then, well, here's your mile of approved permits, but 6 of those poles need to be changed out now. And it's like, well, why weren't they changed out before? Because if you go look, there's woodpecker holes, there's split tops. They've already should have been. So they're passing the buck down because they don't want to, basically invest in their own plant to get it back up to code.
Okay.
And they pass the buck off on ISPs to pay for it.
All right. So last thoughts on joint use before
Yeah,
we go to our last 2 questions.
I do think that resources are an issue with primarily electric cooperatives. I mean, I know we deal with some very small electric cooperatives. There's one in Georgia. They only have 24 full-time employees, right? And so, but I think, and this goes back to something we touched on earlier about the importance of communication, going in and talking to the partners that we're going to be working with to deliver fiber broadband, prioritizing the work, right? That helps immensely with the process. But it's still a lengthy process, and it doesn't matter if you're just attaching or if you're overlashing. Now, overlashing simply means you're taking the fiber and you're overlashing it on the copper line that's there. You would think, okay, that should be a simple process, should go through. It's still a lengthy process.
All right. We've got about 5 more minutes, and I want to ask our last 2 questions together. One is about the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Remaining Funds, or as it's sometimes called, non-deployment funds. We know there's going to be a lot of them because of the changes that the Trump administration put in as far as the benefit of the bargain. So for that 15 to 20 billion, what are your thoughts about how that impacts the BEAD deployment, and particularly some of these issues we've been speaking about here? And secondly, we fortunately, I think, have gotten through this entire panel without mentioning the word artificial intelligence. But now we're going to. And so the question is, how does this data center mania that we're seeing in the country right now tie into our issue? Is it one and the same? Is it a different issue? What are your thoughts about the connection between the networks you all are building or involved in building and the data center build out that's necessary for AI? Let's go down the row.
Well, as Chairman Hudson said this morning, for these data centers that are being built, if you don't have fiber to them, it's just a refrigerator. It's just an icebox, right? And so we appreciate all of the efforts, especially at the federal level. I know that Representative Bruce Westerman is going to speak here shortly about his bill that would primarily help with permitting reform for energy. A lot of that legislation would also help with fiber deployment to get to these data centers, right? We see strong demand from the hyperscalers for Unity Fiber, and that's only going to continue. And they want it quickly, right? And in some instances, they want 4 paths in and out, related to it. Where are these data centers being built? Primarily in tier 2, tier 3 markets, where we're set up nicely to serve as Unity, but it's all tied together when trying to deploy fiber broadband either to the home or to a data center or to a business.
Becky?
I think they're all intermingled, and frankly, streamlining permitting is sort of the low-hanging fruit because there are so many other additional issues. There's transmission constraints, there's, generation considerations. I think getting the permitting right for the broadband component of this is really critical. I also think, in terms of the non-deployment dollars, making sure that 4G and 5G and those resources could be used for that. That's very supplementary. You can't get fiber everywhere, and so other solutions are going to be necessary, as we've learned over time. And just for some of these roadblocks and stumbling spots where, gosh, there's no money to replace the poles because nobody wants to bear the responsibility. We should look at those non-deployment funds being used for some of those types of issues as well.
Okay, excellent point, Becky. Ben, give us your thoughts.
Just really quick, because I think it's been covered well, that I think that the non-deployment, to the extent they can be used for permitting assistance, is important. I think something to bear in mind, and I think it has been mentioned, is the reality is a lot of these municipalities aren't holding up permits because they want to, it's because they lack resources. And so if there's the ability to free up resources to allow these communities what they need to work the permits quickly, and maybe also departments of transportation, if you're doing this at the state level, to give them some dedicated resources to get more people working on permitting, to get the permits that are in the DOT right of ways processed more quickly. And I think that does help with AI data centers as well. The redundancy issue, how do we make sure that we have multiple paths going there, means we are going to need to be permitted in multiple directions. You can't just use what's there right now in the right of way. You need new rights of way. And so I think that it could be used for both.
Thank you, Ariane.
Excellent points. Only to add, because so many have been said, would be the people in the software for permitting. I think this is a great opportunity for states to provide temporary resources for communities as they need them, right? Some communities are going to need it within the first few months, some at the second half of the deployment build. And so the states are a really good opportunity to manage some of that. The second would be for underground safety. You mentioned at the top, we've talked about this before, Drew. So much of this, if you can't go on poles because it's a little hard, you go underground is the alternative. And so the importance of making sure that underground is marked safely. The locates process has the software needed. When it's a large project, there's actually a completely separate set of rules. We're all doing large projects, which is qualified as anything over a mile. So you're going to need more resources to make sure that we're all being safe underground.
Ben?
Yeah.
Brandon, excuse me.
Oh, you're right. I can go by.
Made that mistake.
Becky, I think, made a great point when it comes to the funding for the polls. I think that is probably one of the best ideas to do with the extra funds. Like, why not? Because it doesn't just help broadband, it also helps the power companies make sure that, their single and three phases are not falling down off the ground because it's been overloaded. It's a great idea, but honestly, take some of the money and put it into the locators. Most, you might not know, but they get paid usually under $20 an hour. They get training for 2 weeks. And then there's the ones that go out to make sure that they can find the underground plants. And, between gas and power, that's scary. I was on the Verizon 1 build in Wisconsin. This is back in 2017, when basically an entire city block outside of Madison was blown up because the gas was improperly located. So the fact that we have locate companies that are only training for 2 weeks for one of the most dangerous underground jobs there is when it comes to anything near gas or power, it's a little scary. So let's take some of that money, help, maybe fund some of these companies a little bit better, have a joint partnership that's private public, or better resources for training with better tools. It's a scary job out there. And, I applaud all the men and women that are putting, fiber out. This is, if you think about it, this is the railroad of ours today, is what we're building, and it's going to be here forever. And we're all sitting in this room, and, this is our moment to do it right and do it the right way.
Well, wonderful word to end on. Clearly, we didn't cover everything we could have or should have, but at least I will be around, and I think many of our other panelists will be. Please join me in thanking David, Becky, Ben, Ariane, and Brendan. Take care.
On behalf of the INCOMPAS team, I'd like to thank all of our participants this morning. We're going to take a short break. We have a 15-minute break scheduled into our agenda today. Please be back in your seats at 11 o'clock. We have Congressman Westerman, the chair of the House Committee on Natural Resources. He will start his remarks or his discussion with Chip right at 11 o'clock. Thanks, everyone. Hope you had a great morning.